Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about the Regional Direct Air Capture Hubs program and the recently announced Notice of Intent for the next round of Direct Air Capture Hubs funding. My name is Kelly Cummins, and I'm the Acting Director at the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, commonly referred to as OCED. And we are so pleased to be speaking with you today about the Direct Air Capture Hub program's latest funding opportunity. And in this webinar, we'll provide an overview of the DAC Hubs program. We'll provide key information on this funding opportunity, what the next steps are, and resources. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Beth Weed, the Direct Air Capture Hubs Stakeholder Engagement Lead, to go over a few of the webinar logistics and give a brief overview of what you'll be seeing today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you to all the participants who are here joining us today. Before we begin the session, I want to go over a few webinar logistics. You can turn on live captions by clicking on the captions in your control panel. To turn on Spanish or ASL interpretation, please click the interpretation button, also in the control panel. You will be able to find recordings of this webinar in both English and Spanish, as well as a copy of the presentation on our website within the next week. Many attendees submitted questions ahead of time, and while we will not be able to address these as part of a Q&A session today, we will compile a list of questions we've received and post a Q&A to make available any answers we're able to provide based on information that is public at this time. First, please note that this webinar will only include publicly available information provided from the Notice of Intent or NOI. Attending the webinar and watching the recording are completely voluntary and will not impact the future application process. In case of any inconsistencies between the NOI and what's discussed in this webinar, the NOI document is the controlling document. So today we'll be covering first a high-level overview of the direct air capture work at the Department of Energy across NEDL, FECM, and OCED. We'll get into outcomes from the Request for Information, or RFI, that OCED issued in February on the role of DAC funding for mid-scale commercial facilities. And then that ties nicely into how that then informed details of this current NOI. So we'll go through this DAC Hubs opportunity, including project eligibility, key application requirements. And then finally, we'll end the session by covering next steps and resources, information to help orient you to future touch points with OCED and other resources available to everyone on this call. So with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Grant.
Hi, everyone. Hey, I'm Grant Faber. I'm the Direct Air Capture Hubs Program Manager working on the carbon dioxide removal team at the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. Thank you all very much for being here today. So in my role at Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, I oversee our office's work on the 19 topic areas 1 and 2 direct air capture hubs that I will speak a little bit more about momentarily. And I work on a variety of our other DAC and carbon removal related projects. So to kick off here, I just want to acknowledge that we'll be talking about some higher TRL DAC work today and demonstration scale funding. DOE's work on direct air capture actually spans all developmental levels, from new materials development to integrated bench scale testing, all the way through pilot plants, engineering scale, or engineering studies and large-scale demonstrations, as I noted, we'll talk a little bit more about today. And underlying all of this work is, robust cost modeling, life cycle assessment, community benefits planning, workforce development, and really everything that's necessary to enable a holistic build-out of direct air captures as a technology and as an industry and broader industrial ecosystem in the United States. But today, I'm going to be giving a little bit more background on the Direct Air Capture Hubs program in particular to provide some context for our discussion. So on the next slide, just wanted to provide just some background information about DAC Hubs. So these were originally funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which provided $3.5 billion to establish at least 4 megaton scale direct air capture hubs in locations around the country. So each of these hubs is meant to include a network of the actual the actual direct air capture project, potential carbon dioxide utilization or conversion processes, which may involve CO2 conversion into low carbon fuels and chemicals, or perhaps building materials like concrete, as well as CO2 transport and storage infrastructure that is generally necessary for long-term removal of that captured CO2. So to provide a little bit of context, yeah, each hub is expected to ultimately achieve at least this 1 million metric tons of CO2 from the atmosphere per year capture capacity. And for just a little bit of grounding on that point, 1 million tons of CO2 per year is about equivalent to the emissions from 250,000 passenger vehicles. So while the direct impact, like the direct climate impact of one particular hub is not necessarily super significant or groundbreaking necessarily on its own, these hubs will still be tremendously important for establishing that foundation for the direct air capture ecosystem in the United States and subsequent scalability. So on the bottom here, I've outlined just a few of the attributes that were initially identified in the bipartisan infrastructure law that these hubs should ideally satisfy. So you can see here, there's a focus on scalability, on high potential for CO2 utilization or storage, which makes sense. But also there's a focus on siting these hubs in economically distressed areas and areas where there's a lot of employment potential as well. So yeah, in this sense, the hubs may be able to be used to preserve some level of jobs in regions where oil and gas may be being phased out, and where there's perhaps a desire to leverage some of the existing infrastructure and maintain some of those jobs. So these DAC hubs may be able to help serve that purpose. So yeah, on the next slide, we just want to give a little bit of an update on the progress of the first round of the Direct Air Capture Hubs program to date. So in August of 2023, 21 DAC hub projects were selected for funding. To date, as of today, 18 of those have been awarded, with the remaining 3 still under negotiation. And you can see here the topic areas from the first round of the DAC hubs had range here. The first one being feasibility studies and just trying to find an appropriate site. Topic area 2 is focused on feed or front-end engineering design studies that try to say engineer and actually have a better vision for a larger percentage of what that hub is actually going to look like and how it may actually operate and tap into energy resources and transport and storage and so forth. And then finally, topic area 3 is actual project development and permitting and moving on perhaps to construction and operation funding pending successful down selection there. So these topic areas at the time were drafted more or less to reflect and be suited for the existing technological maturity of the DAC industry. And as we'll discuss a little bit later, that same principle underlied some of the thinking that went into the topic areas outlined in the notice of intent. So yeah, on the next slide and my final slide here, I just wanted to provide a map and just showing the distribution of these topic areas 1 through 3 direct air capture hubs, as well as some previously funded pre-feed and feed studies that were funded by my office, Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. I wanted to show this map for a couple of reasons. The first one is to point out that there is actually, interestingly, already been an emergent degree of clustering of some of these hub projects. So you can see that in Southern California, along the Gulf Coast, maybe a little bit in the Midwest and along the Front Range as well, we're seeing some clustering of these initial DAC hub and other kinds of DAC projects, which may just be reflective of existing CO2 transport and storage resources in those areas, perhaps access or perhaps clean energy resources present in those regions as well. But something I want to point out is that we're definitely open to considering DAC anywhere. There's CO2 everywhere. I mean, it's pretty evenly distributed in the atmosphere, and that's something that's interesting and special about direct air capture is that it can really be sited anywhere. technically, which gives us a degree of flexibility when thinking about siting and thinking about how to do this in the most optimal way to bring jobs, economic opportunities, environmental benefits, and other kinds of co-benefits from these facilities to people all over the country and perhaps even the world. So yeah, with that, thank you very much for listening. And I will now pass to Dan to talk about the mid-scale RFI response and notice of intent and some other topics. So Dan, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Hello, everybody. Thanks for taking time to join us today. I'm Dan Yowitz. I am OSED's strategy lead for carbon dioxide removal. And I'm going to be talking us through two topics today. First is the request for information on mid-scale direct air capture, and then into the details of the new notice of intent. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I wanted to start with the mid-scale RFI because it does really set up a lot of the newer elements that we've integrated into the program that we'll see in the notice of intent. So just a few facts about the mid-scale RFI. It was released in late February. We got a great response, and I should just say, I know many of you listening today were probably among the group of respondents. Thank you for taking the time to do that. We know it's a lot of work, but it is incredibly helpful to have those detailed responses on paper for us to work with. We got almost 50 responses in total, over 20 from actual DAC developers, technology and/or project developers, all the relevant industry groups, I'd say, that cover even a broader swath of those DAC developers. Other CDR developers, labor groups, think tanks, and other kind of stakeholders in the industry. So the mid-scale RFI really asked a question to industry of what is the role of what we termed mid-scale direct air capture, which we quantified as being kind of in the low thousands of tons of capture up into, say, the 10 or up to, I think, 25,000 ton per year capture capacity. What is the role of those facilities in de-risking larger, call them hub scale facilities, and how does that act as a step in DAC scaling? And the response was pretty clear, really, that first commercial step is critical for not all but many DAC technologies. It's really the first step where they moved from a pilot that has de-risked the technology, and they're working with a facility where the business model also needs to work. So they've taken the technology at pilot scale, where maybe they were catching and releasing the CO2, and now they are deploying a facility that has to generate revenue or is capable of generating revenue. So at that point, the type of energy that you're using matters for your life cycle analysis. The storage or utilization of the CO2 is critical to enable whatever that business model may be, say sale of carbon removal credits. So the industry really confirmed that is indeed an important step for many DAC technologies, that step is often critical to reach larger scale, and that there are a lot of unique kind of challenges where federal funding would be very catalytic. So that was really useful feedback. Another piece of feedback we got in the RFI is that DOE should not in any way take its eye off the ball of larger hub projects and larger facilities as really delivering the capacity that's going to get us to hub scale, the goal of the 4 million ton hubs, and of course beyond to more climate relevant scale, as Grant alluded to. So takeaways were we should explore ways to support mid-scale. We should not take our eye off the ball of the large scale facilities that are going to be the main hub capacity drivers, I'd say, and that flexibility at mid-scale is key. Flexibility in siting, flexibility in how we define mid-scale, flexibility in operational life, and so on. So those were really great lessons, and as you'll see, we've worked most of these into the new program. We could go to the next slide, please. Okay, now on to the notice of intent. Before we get into these details, I should just reiterate the caveat that this is only a notice of intent, and as I'm sure you all read in the fine print, there very well can and may be things that change when the eventual NOFO is released. Of course, the NOFO is going to be a much more detailed and expansive document, so by its nature, it's going to have a lot of the answers to the questions you all may have, but there are things that can and may change between now and then. So just bear that in mind as I walk through the details. Next slide, please. This slide gives a snapshot of the new program's funding and how it's allocated. We don't actually have the top line number on the slide here, but the notice of intent indicates up to 1.8 billion will be made available for this new program. It's worth mentioning that 1.8 billion does reflect the remaining amount of funding in the provision available for new programs. So when you factor in the 1.8 with the amount offered in the first FOA, that is the total amount available for new programs. So how will that 1.8 billion be distributed across the topic areas? I'm going to actually start on the right side here because that's where the largest dollar amounts are. This topic area 3, this is similar in many ways to the first FOA's topic area 3 in the sense that this is funding what we now call large-scale commercial DAC facilities. This is where the majority of the funding is intended to go, and these will be the facilities that will either establish a new hub or add capacity to an existing hub. In the middle, we have topic area 2, which as I was just referring to, these mid-scale commercial DAC facilities, less funding. Obviously, these are going to be smaller facilities, and we'll get into those details. But for the facilities at that size, we think this will be a really important way to support those mid-scale commercial facilities. And then topic area 1, we'll get into the details of all of these in a minute, but these are platforms where those mid-scale and other early commercial DAC facilities can go to build and operate their facility. We're calling those infrastructure scaling platforms. Next slide, please. Okay, drilling down on some of the details here for the topic area 3, the large-scale commercial facilities. These will need to be proposed with a capture capacity of at least 25,000 tons per year. You're welcome to propose a larger facility, of course, that's great. You're also welcome to propose reaching a larger capacity total in stages, as long as no single stage is smaller than that 25,000 ton per year minimum. We will also be asking you to show us your vision for how this technology will scale to 10x beyond this, not as part of this project, but just the future vision for deployment of this technology. We will, as with the first FOA, we will be requiring robust life cycle analysis and MRV plans. We know that a key question for a lot of you is the readiness requirements. So I'm gonna touch on a few of the key points around what we will expect at the time of application. We will want to see that you, for this large scale commercial topic area, we will want to see that you're basically scaling up a technology that you've deployed at smaller scale commercially already. So we will want to see what we call a reference facility at TRL 7, 6 months of operational data, and we would want that reference facility to be no smaller than 1/25. So the quick math on that is you would need a 1,000 ton per year facility, ton per year, to be proposing the minimum of 25,000 and then scaling up from there. And then just to emphasize the fact that we're really looking for commercial applications here, not catch and release. So we would expect to see the relevant energy inputs and carbon infrastructure to make it a commercial facility. Next slide, please. Okay, topic area 2 looks similar with a few of the key numbers changed. These mid-scale commercial facilities are envisioned at being between 2,000 and 25,000 tons per year. So that kind of creates the step right before the large-scale facilities. Here, we'd like to see the vision for after this project, how you will be deploying or demonstrating, I'd say, squarely in the large scale range. So we'd like to see your plans after mid-scale to get into the 100,000 ton or above, just to know really where this technology is going and how it can be more relevant to hub scale, large scale facilities going forward. Again, robust LCA and MRV are going to be required. As far as the reference facility here, we are expecting these may be the first true commercial facility. So your reference facility could be a TRL6 facility. We'd like to see a certain number of hours of operations. Again, a similar scaling factor of 1/25. So if I'm not doing my math wrong here, that would be an 80 ton per year facility to be proposing the minimum of a 2,000 ton per year mid-scale facility. And again, a commercial facility here, not a catch and release pilot project. Next slide, please. Okay, topic area 1, the infrastructure scaling platforms. This is a new concept. What we are hoping to find and fund here are locations where those mid-scale projects or other small or mid-scale commercial DAC projects can go to site their facility without needing to develop a site from scratch. So this is something that was identified in our RFI as really a key bottleneck that we want to help unlock. Again, supporting these early stage commercial, or I should say smaller scale commercial facilities on their way to larger hub scale. The challenges here that the RFI helped educate us on really are that finding a site, developing a site, and getting access to the clean energy that's required for the LCA and the carbon management infrastructure are critical challenges at this stage, which really are not core to the tech itself. So the idea behind these platforms really is to create host sites where small and medium commercial DAC facilities can go to access these clean energy and carbon infrastructure resources. Maybe just to emphasize the access point here, what we hope to find really are sites where those resources are already being developed, and a host site for DAC could be really just added on to that. So it's not to say that we wouldn't allow funding to go directly towards the development of new energy or carbon infrastructure assets, but our hope, and we think the better use of funding, would be to find places where those resources are already developed or are already being developed as part of another project, and say, hey, could you make some room for these smaller DAC facilities to take part in that and not have to develop their own? If we can find 1 or 2 or 3 of these, we think this would be really catalytic for both those first commercial facilities and the larger scale facilities that they'll go on to do afterwards. So we will want to see what is in place or in development as far as those energy and offtake resources, what the business plan would be, and who a potential list of DAC tenants could be. Next slide, please. Okay, this is my favorite slide because it is the encapsulation, I think, of what we've changed compared to the first FOA to make the remaining funding more flexible and more supportive of the DAC industry on its way towards these 4 million ton hubs. So I'm going to go through each one of these one by one. In the first row, we're highlighting here that we have added more flexibility across time in the sense that we're envisioning recurring, likely annual openings for this funding. So we hope that will really meet the quickly scaling DAC industry where it is through these recurring openings. That's a feature we're really excited about. The flexible funding ranges, if you notice that the different topic areas have ranges of funding, that's an important flexibility element, because as it will let us really allocate the funding across those topic areas as we're seeing the most impactful projects. On the second line, we have the minimum facility size. We lowered that modestly, but we think importantly from a minimum of 50,000 tons in the first FOA to 25,000 tons going forward. Again, that only applies to the large scale topic area 3. There's a different minimum for the mid scale. The third line is the hub composition. In the first FOA, we really envisioned and expected that, at least for the TA3 and really across the topic areas, that applicants would bring DOE unified hub projects. We still love unified hub projects, and we are eager to see those, but we now have broadened somewhat the type of projects that we'll potentially select as comprising a hub. So we will still welcome unified hub projects, but we're also open to large-scale projects that can help either expand the capacity of a hub, of an existing hub, or independently establish a hub in a new region. So that sort of independent project selection, and the idea of we may see unified hub projects. We may also see great independent large-scale facilities in a region that can comprise a hub. And as Grant alluded to earlier, we're already seeing some natural clustering across different projects there. So we hope this will let us support more projects over time. The readiness requirements, as I mentioned, the initial FOA had a 10x maximum to enter the construction phase. I know many people took notice of the 1,000-ton requirement to enter the project development phase, but then there was subsequently a 10x maximum scaling to enter the construction phase. We've now expanded that to 25x, so that's more expansive, and we do intend to do, in addition to that quantitative screen, we'll also be doing a qualitative risk assessment of readiness, because every DAC technology is a little different and scaling means different things. So there will be sort of a dual-pronged approach there. I won't dwell much on the next two since we've already covered them, but we think the additions of a minority of the funding going towards mid-scale DAC and the infrastructure platforms to support them is really going to be critical for success for these hubs going forward. And then just maybe a procedural point, but an important one. The first FOA went straight to full applications. The process we're expecting going forward is going to be a little different, where we will ask for either pre-applications for one topic area or concept papers for others. And that has worked really well in other OSED programs as an interim step, I'd say. It lets you as the applicant provide us with a view of your project earlier on before going through the effort of creating the full application. It lets us respond to that and give an early sense of what we call encourage or discourage prior to entering into the full application review process. So that interim step has worked really well in other OSED programs. We pulled it over here because we thought that would really help both sides. Before we move on to the next slide, I will just make one note as well, or two notes rather. One, that we do welcome, of course, applicants that may be projects or individual partners from our current FOA 1 portfolio. Those projects would have no advantage or disadvantage compared to other applicants. And then I will briefly mention the the RFI that we mentioned in the notice of intent. If you caught it, it was fairly far down in the document, but we are eager to, again, ask the DAC industry and other stakeholders some questions around how funding for DAC that does not focus on subsidizing the CapEx, but maybe more focused on subsidizing the operational phase or the revenue model of DAC could be complementary. So I'll just say preview of coming attractions, keep an eye out for that RFI. And with that, I am going to wrap up my section, say thank you again to everybody for joining. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chris Anderson.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dan. As Dan mentioned, my name is Chris Anderson, and I am the Notice of Funding Opportunity Manager here at OSED. Next slide. I want to walk through the anticipated timeline for the NOFO. And first, before I do that, I want to drive just the point that even this very general timeline is just an estimate. And there could be potential, although unlikely, changes in the process that we've outlined here. The timing uncertainty in particular obviously increases as we move further out. So with that said, we are currently targeting a NOFO release this winter. We're then likely to require concept papers, as Dan was talking about, for topic areas 2 and 3, and pre-application submissions for topic areas 1 sometime during the spring of next year. We're expecting the deadline for full applications to be in the summer. And then DOE would like to make selections sometime during winter of 25-26. So you might be curious, why are we expecting a roughly 6-month gap between applications and selections? So variety of things that DOE has to do. We have to conduct various compliance reviews. We obviously have to do a merit review. Potentially we'll be exchanging comments back and forth with applicants. We have to engage a federal consensus panel, do security vetting, OMB approval, et cetera. And the purpose of sort of underlying all of those processes is to ensure fairness in selections and ensure that the selected projects meet program mission objectives and DOE security standards. So next, I'll pass it to my colleague Beth to discuss an exciting opportunity that's coming up. Next slide.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So returning to the present day, our next opportunity for engagement is the upcoming Carbon Management Industry Day. This is a completely optional event that aims to further inform potential applicants about the program's priorities, details on the solicitation process, and then we'll also provide a really good forum for networking and teaming among potential applicants. So this is an in-person event. It'll be held on November 13th in Washington, D.C. Some of you may already have submitted the interest form. I do want to highlight the date change from November 19th, which was originally listed. It will be on the 13th in DC. If you'd like to attend, please fill out the form. The link will be posted in the chat. And also please utilize the DAC engagement page to stay connected and up to date with future opportunities. On this slide, there's more details about the Regional DAC Hubs program, and then also links to a few of the resources that we mentioned during the webinar today. So those links will also be going into the chat. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions and concerns to the DAC OSED email address listed here. And then sign up for our newsletter and stay informed about ongoing opportunities within OSED. So on behalf of all of our speakers, Kelly, Dan, Grant, Chris, and myself, we really appreciate you all taking the time to join us and learn more about this exciting notice of intent. So with that, thank you and have a great rest of your day.